This is Grafted Together with ACSI Chief Ministry Officer Jerry Nelson.
Well, welcome everyone to a special edition of Grafted Together. In this edition of Grafted Together, we want to focus on the Flourishing Faith Index. And the Flourishing Faith Index is a new tool for delivering powerful, practical, and personalized insights into the state of your school's efforts to equip your students with what we believe is the most important thing, a biblical worldview, as they are being spiritually formed in the image of Christ. And so this tool is developed in K through 12 Christian schools for use in K through 12 Christian schools. And so as someone who cares deeply about the spiritual formation of my family and my community, I'm very grateful for this model, for it helps us think about biblical worldview development and spiritual formation in a holistic way. And I'm certain as you understand this model as a listener, as a head of school, as a spiritual formation director, as a teacher in the classroom, or even a coach, and you understand what it's both designed to show us and show your school and how to use it, you'll learn to ask the right questions for your own context. And I know it will be transformative for you and your school community. Now, the index consists of 6 domains with 28 newly validated constructs organized into a two-tiered flourishing faith model to measure both the flourishing faith core, the head, the heart, and the hands, together with the biblical worldview and spiritual formation ring. That's the intellectual, the nurture, and the practical. And so first, we want to recognize that measuring spiritual formation and biblical worldview is a challenge because the scripture tells us that no one can know the heart. We can see what a person does on the outside, but the motives are not always obvious. However, with the right questions, motives can be drawn out. And we know Jesus was a master of this. Who do people say that I am? Who is my neighbor? Or as he walked with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, he asked, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" As if Jesus didn't know. You know, the questions asked were designed for the disciples to reflect and engage in conversation. They were self-evaluative in nature, designed to assess adherence to truth with an aim to spur on correct or God-glorifying action. And so again, while we can't know the heart, we can know something. We can measure the fruit and ask questions related to the process that produced the fruit. And again, the fruit doesn't always tell the whole story, but it does tell us something. And further, the scriptures provide us insight into those contributing factors to biblical worldview development and spiritual formation. And so here at ACSI, we've been doing our best to basically say to all of our schools that spiritual formation is what matters most. It's our students being formed in the image of Christ. And ACSI over the last 2 years has published a spiritual formation journey map. And that journey map has 4 areas. First, in order to have a spiritual formation plan as a leader, you need to be clear about your expected student outcomes. And then once you broadcast that to your community, the next step is you need to take a snapshot of where you are. What is the gap to goal for you being able to reach your expected student outcomes? And so what we recommend is you do some type of assessment. And then next, you need to develop a plan. How are you going to train each part of your school, all of your constituents, to help them on that journey? And then the last part is how are you or what are you putting in place to help every constituent in your school deal with hardships that naturally come with the Christian life? And that makes up the spiritual formation journey. So today we're going to focus on assessments, and that's the Flourishing Faith Index. And I'm really privileged to have, I believe, now he might not like this term, a legend in Christian education, Dr. Steve Whitaker, who is the president and head of school at the First Academy in Orlando. Dr. Whitaker, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man, thank you. I'm not going to take that legend tag, though, because that means you're old if you're a legend. I'm not old yet, so I can't take that tag, but thank you.
Well, listen, I won't make you feel older, but I remember before I became a head of school, man, your name was well known and you've been doing great things. You've been very innovative really leading the way in some key areas. And so, again, today, we want to talk about the Flourishing Faith Index. But, I don't want to assume that everybody knows you, you know. But listen, can you just give us a quick snippet, a quick history of just how you got to become the president and the head of school at TFA?
Sure, Jerry, that's great. And thank you for letting me be a part of the podcast today. What you guys are doing is really special. And for me to be a little part of that is a blessing on a day like today. So, it's the end of the school year. So a lot of things going on, a lot of challenges. So these moments just kind of block it out and just hang with
Yeah.
you is really good. So I've been looking forward to this. But man, I was a basketball coach and a history teacher. And on my journey, God kept opening doors for more leadership, and I just simply said yes. And so that led me from Jupiter Christian School, where I was a teacher, coach, then high school principal, to Whitfield Academy in Louisville, Kentucky, where I was the head of school there. And then in 2003, almost 22 years ago, we moved to Orlando and joined forces here at the First Academy. So my journey's really been one of just saying yes to whatever God put in front of me and trying to steward that well as I could each step of the way.
Yeah, and obvious, anyone who knows about TFA has really just been a leader in Christian education for many years. Dr. Taylor spent some time at TFA, so I'm really wondering if all roads, they would say all roads lead to Rome. I'm wondering if all roads lead to Florida somehow, through HFI. I think it used to be California, then Colorado, now it's
Yeah,
shifted
now
to
it's
Florida.
Florida.
But again, a part of just watching God do an amazing work at TFA, and I know you would say it's been God's work, and I've been able to see that. 'Cause, I'm not that far from you. Been on
Right.
campus several times. I'm curious because over the last 22 years, a lot of things have come across your desk as now president, head of school. And you have to sort through a lot of information, and a lot of things really package themselves as being really, really promising. And
Right.
so you have to do your homework because especially when there's a significant price tag or an investment of time that's associated with it. But the FFI, the Flourishing Faith Index, comes out, and I'm curious, what intrigued you about this model and what caused you to take that leap and make that investment of money and time?
No, that's a great question. And there are so many things that are trying to grab our attention in this education space at this cultural
Mhm.
moment. And
Oh yeah.
I think it's important for those of us who have the responsibility to steward our leadership of our schools well, is to try to find some filters through which we
Mhm.
make the selection of what we invest in, don't invest in, etc. So for us at TFA, school culture is a really important part of who we are. We say that a great school culture is when what we believe matches with what we say and do.
Yeah, that's good.
So we're looking for things that'll help us do that, help us line up the believe, say, and do trifecta is what I call it. And when those three things are together, you get some really good synergy and you can make progress across a lot of domains. So the second part that was intriguing for us is we like what Barna Institute teaches about resilient disciples. Those are the kids that stick with their faith even after high school, and they've made a commitment to Jesus. They are involved in a faith community beyond church, by the way. That's why I think Christian school is important. That second point that they make, they're
Mhm.
involved in something beyond their church. I think that's the Christian school for us.
Yeah.
They're involved in a lot of different things. But so when you think about these resilient disciples, you want to know who they are and how to train them well. And so we think the questions that FFI asks and the process we go through to think through that helps us in the training of these resilient disciples. The last thing I would say is that the FFI instrument is holistic with
Mm.
regard to spiritual formation. It moves beyond just data points. And I think that those who use it will quickly see that it's a resource to be used, but most importantly, to apply. And so those three things kind of caught our attention and made the FFI instrument something we were intrigued by.
Yeah, I've said this, publicly. I had the privilege of being on the front end
Mm,
of development of this, and really having some deep conversations with our researchers at ACSI. And I remember talking with Dr. Matt Lee, and they were really trying to figure out, all right, what's the graphic that they're going to use to really try and describe
mm.
what the research was showing them. And when he came out with this graphic and he explained, I was like, you know, a lot of people produce information graphics, like infographics. I
Sure.
said, but I really believe you guys nailed it in terms of explaining the inner core, the outer ring, but also really representing very well that people come to faith in different ways and everything's influencing everything, and that it really becomes the responsibility of the school leaders and people who are driving that culture to create those conditions. Because I'm sure you understand this as being in Christian education. You can't force anybody to love Jesus. You just got
No.
to create those conditions.
Well, and again, I think what we all dream of is a culture that has impact, doesn't it? That's the
Absolutely.
dream. And if you can take the things that you already believe and you can talk about them a lot, you say them, talk about them a lot, and you line them up with what you're doing,
Yeah.
then the dream is that that culture becomes infectious, that it starts to leak out into our lives, into our spaces, into our people. And then you have an instrument like FFI to sort of overlay on that,
Right.
and then on an annual basis to mine the data, to mine the findings, to use those findings to inform decision making. And so that's really what makes this special.
Yeah, I really appreciate you mentioning the research that Barna did on a resilient disciples, and for those of who might wonder where that data is, and well, let me ask you, Steve, because I think you're referring to the two books that they did. One was You Lost Me, and then the other one was Faith for Exiles. Are you
Yes.
referencing? Oh, okay.
So yeah, so the first one was You Lost Me, and then
Uh-huh.
they were so intrigued by the findings that they've been tracking this group annually,
Right.
and and then the exilic sort of context kind of emerged from the first one. So yeah, those are the two most noticeable pieces of research that they've done. But I think it's going to continue to evolve
Yeah.
and continue to be a great resource for all of us to use, because honestly, when you look at that, at least for me, I stopped and asked the question, okay, where does the Christian school fit into this?
Hmm.
And it was clear to me it was in that second section alongside other associations or activities beyond the church. That's where we can come in and partner with the church. There's a lot of challenging things about being associated with the church in the way that we are and many others are, but I describe it like this: the opening line of the Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. If you get it right in the context of a Christian school associated with the church, it's the best of times. And you
Yes.
can do things in a way that are just so highly impactful. And so you guys are helping us do that through this FFI.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Well, once you decided to administer it, anytime you go into any new venture, there's always some hopes that you have. What hopes did you have going into it?
Well, we wanted, when we began to read about it, we wanted to have information across various constituent groups. So
Mm,
we knew the students were important, but the students that had left here, the alumni, we wanted to know what was going on in their world.
mhm.
We wanted to know how our faculty and staff felt. So I think for us, it was interesting and exciting to look at this and say, hey, we can get constituency groups across these areas of information, and we can get feedback from them. We can measure that information, so that was number one. Number two was it was really helpful to know that we were going to get both strengths and weaknesses, areas of growth, if you will, and not just a pat on the back and say, "Oh, way to go." I mean,
Yeah,
anytime you do this, you want to walk away going, "Hey, I need to get better in this area." And so for us, we like that idea. Of course, anything we can do to increase our likelihood of being effective in training the next generation of Christian leaders, we want that for our campus. And
mhm.
so those are sort of the things that just immediately sort of grabbed us to say, this is something we need to dig into.
What did it affirm? that you were like, yeah, we went in, we knew we were good at this, and the FFI affirmed it. And the second question would be, what is it that you thought you were good at? I don't know. We're digging a little bit. You're just like, yeah, we might need some work in this area.
You know, probably the strength and the weakness. I'll just put it that way. We were affirmed by the fact that we found our students are practicing the spiritual disciplines. And so
Mm,
those are things you talk about, those are things you try to model, but very rarely do you ask the question, how are we doing with the spiritual disciplines? And so
right.
we were encouraged to find that Bible reading, prayer, and those disciplines were active in the life of our students. Um, the part that was a little concerning, and I think this is a national trend, is taking that application to the broader community of believers. Um, our students are not as connected to the local church as we'd like them to be.
Mm,
And faith is
interesting.
personal, but faith flourishes in the context of community.
Right.
And so we believe that we need to continue to grow in that area. We know we're battling, like every school, the AAU culture that's active on the weekends, the travel ball
Mm,
culture active on the weekends. And so we need to think about what do we do in that context to celebrate, some good spiritual discipline practices, but also, hey, we got to take this personal faith and build it into community to let it flourish a little bit better.
yeah. And that's quite interesting. And just for our listeners, just for context, folks who have heard of the FFI but unfamiliar with the FFI, one of the types of instrument or one of the types of assessments embedded within an instrument in the instrument is a frequency assessment of the practice of spiritual discipline. So just like Bible reading,
Yep.
church attendance, and things of that nature. I just wanted to give that context. It's not the only thing that the FFI measures, but there's a frequency survey that asks how often are students practicing these particular things. But I think what's most interesting in that is that the disciplines themselves are being practiced, but there's not the connection to the local church. And I'm just thinking anecdotally, and I'd love your response to this. That means TFA is doing something really, really good to encourage that, because if they're not connected to the local church, then the assumption is, well,
Mm,
maybe that's not where the influence is coming from. What's your
right.
thoughts on that?
Well, there's a landmine there I'm not going to step in, but there's
Then
one I'm going
don't
to
step into the
embrace.
landmine.
One I'm going to embrace to say we do rejoice that we get to participate in the spiritual formation of students and in those practices of the spiritual disciplines. How do we do that? For example, this year, every school year, we choose a school year theme. For us, it's the Jesus way. And this
Mm,
is based on John Mark Comer's book that you've
uh-huh.
probably been familiar with, Practicing the Way. And so
Yes.
in Practicing the Way, Comer really unpacks the disciplines. And he kind of does it in three ways. He says that when we're practicing the Jesus way, we are with Jesus, we become like Jesus, and we will do as Jesus did. Those three
Mm,
things. And so
mhm.
we've been talking about those all year long. Be with Jesus, become like Jesus, do as Jesus did. And so that process of continuing that conversation with students is, I think, in part what leads toward this embracing of these disciplines. I would
Mm,
also say that in this cultural moment, students are more inclined toward the spiritual practices than they were 10 or 15 years ago, in my opinion. I think there's a
mhm.
hunger for the disciplines. I think there's a hunger for structure around
Yeah.
spiritual formation. And so we're leaning into that.
Yeah, and even though this isn't the subject of our conversation, it's actually happening across denominations, but
Right.
also different expressions of Christianity. I mean, I know I'm here in South Florida. There's a huge Catholic population,
Yes.
and I've
Hmm.
been in contact with many friends who love Jesus, but they're Catholics, and there's a
Right.
resurgence in Bible reading, in prayer,
Renovation.
in the
Yep.
spiritual discipline. So I think that just kind of goes back to, quoting some other Barna research on just the open generation. It's like there is a
Right.
hungering for more. And by the way, I do have to reference here, Steve. you survive in a place for 22 odd years by not stepping on landmines. So kudos to you. So
Oh.
so when you got all this information back, what was the next step that once you got everything back, what did you do next?
Well, that's a great question, and we did the same thing we almost always practice with communication. We start with our leadership team. We sat down, looked at the data, said, what do we like? What do we need to work on? What are we hearing God say to us about what we're seeing in front of us? And then we shaped that, and we talked to the faculty and staff. We said, here's what we learned from the work you did in your classrooms. Let's celebrate this. Let's lean into this. Here's some just markers of success, and here's some opportunities to grow. And then finally, the third step is we roll that out as we do all the time in a annual report to our families. And so they then saw the areas of strength, the areas we need to grow in, and use that really as a beginning point. Because this is for us is a beginning. It's not a point in time. We're beginning the journey. We'll do this every year as frequently as we're able to,
Mhm.
and continue to build on what we're learning.
Yeah, and I'm taking a look at your annual report, and at the end of that annual report, you have your three goals that you've listed, and I'd love for you to talk about how the report itself that you receive inspired those three goals. But at first glance, I see that there's three audiences, and I
Okay.
just and that popped right off the page where there's the your goal number one focuses on the students, your goal number two focuses on the faculty and staff, and your goal number three focuses on the families and the friends. But I'll let you go ahead and unpack those three goals. You can articulate a little bit more. I just wanted to highlight that you're really hitting those three areas.
Well, there's a reason why it's called the Trinity, right? The Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. I, I have it. People make fun of me here. Every time I speak, I've got three things I want to say. I think it's easy to remember, and I think when we sat down and looked at our community, at the ministry we've called to do, we have three distinct populations we serve.
Mhm.
Students, first and foremost. Who does that? Our faculty and staff really are the hands-on mechanism, and then ultimately it's the families that are participating in this. So everything we do, Jerry, is run through that filter, that three
Yeah.
stage process to make sure there's both alignment, there's synergy,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there's healthy
Yeah.
dialogue that goes back and forth throughout the planning, the execution of whether it's a strategic plan, capital campaign, or a FFI instrument.
Yeah. And that And I think I've, in my conversations and advising schools to think more holistically about not just their spiritual formation plan. As you know, ACSI has just rolled out the Flourishing Family
Right.
initiative, just really encouraging schools to develop a family, a ministry focus on your family. You just mentioned it's a distinct population, and so that population needs a special type of attention that you're not giving to your students and to your faculty. So there you're serving three distinct constituent groups. And I'm just curious, just off the top, as it relates to your parents, are you continuing your focus on is when you got back your data from the FFI, did it affirm that you were doing a really good job with your parents, or did you feel like you need to make some tweaks with the parents? I'm just curious.
Well, you
What?
know,
Yeah.
yeah, that piece we talked about in terms of church participation, we rely on parents to get kids to church. We
Mhm.
can't take them to church. So I think we need to do a better job of encouraging, teaching, modeling, talking about the importance of uh, spiritual formation in the context of the local church. Now, every year we kind of do an old school thing where it's take your friend to church Sunday. We we promote the heck out of that, and social media and messages to the families. We say wherever you typically go to church, find someone and take them with you this week. And
Yeah,
so
that's good.
that's something we do. Um, we do a big all family worship, and we do also a spring all family worship. And the focus of those are obviously to worship. But every time we talk about, hey, this Sunday, don't forget to be in church. Take somebody with you, take your family to church and go be together in worship. So those are a couple of things. But we've always, well, for many years, we've done the parent university model. So as
Mhm.
you think about FFI, this parent university model is going to be set the stage for us to use the FFI to unpack some of these important topics. Not just that we think they're important, but we have now data to back up the fact that we need to emphasize these things if we're going to
Mhm.
grow together. So, Parent University and FFI are going to be married up in a pretty strategic way.
And the parent university, just for clarification, that is your strategic training of your parents to help them understand how their role in helping their kids be formed in Christ. Is
That's
that an
correct.
accurate?
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah, love that. Well, let's talk about teachers. So we hit the parents. We know
Yep.
parents are the primary educators. They're partnering with TFA, but as you mentioned, that the teachers are the ones that are on the front line. So, what are your plans with your teachers moving forward, based on the data you got back from the FFI?
Well, obviously, we shared it with them, and we already kind of, I like to think of it this way. We were already on the treadmill in some of these areas. This is just going to give us a little fuel to go faster and further. That makes
Yeah,
sense? So,
yeah.
for example, with teachers, by the end of next school year, we'll have 37 of our faculty and staff who are Colson Fellows. So they've gone, 37
Wow,
people have gone through the year-long
wow.
training. And so we compensate that like a master's degree in terms of the salary for a teacher. You get a master's level bump if you do Colson Fellows.
Wow.
Um, these folks who do Colson Fellows also have for the last 3 years led spiritual formation cohort discussion groups
Mhm.
monthly on campus after school. And so we're already doing some things. Again, this is just going to let us go faster and go further. But those are the things that are already in motion, and we'll layer what we get from FFI on top of that, and I think really give it a good boost.
Yeah, that's extremely encouraging. So I guess that would be one of those areas where it was a great affirmation
Right,
for what you're already doing. And I believe it's not just belief. I think there's been some growing research. I just I've been in a lot of conversation with a student who's doing his dissertation specifically on the connection between a person's faith background and their ability to do biblical worldview integration, spiritual formation. So he's really kind of zeroing in that area. And I anecdotally, I said, I know what you're going to find. I think I know what you're going to find. It's really, you can go into particularly churches that are really a lot more strategic in training.
right.
You're usually going to find training in biblical worldview development. You're going to find teachers who come out of that much stronger. But it also, if teachers aren't strong, schools have an amazing opportunity to help supplement that training. And obviously, you're doing that through the Colson Fellows Pro. I mean, there aren't too many programs that get more rigorous than that one.
No doubt. No
Yeah.
doubt.
Well, let's talk about the alumni. And so you mentioned that at the end. It's like, you want to know how they're doing because, we when we get into education, or those of us who have a clear picture of education, we understand that we may not see the fruit of what we do until the kids are, out in the world, if you will, really living it out, and they're getting hit with the onslaught of anti-Christian culture or temptations and what have you. And we won't know how resilient they are until they get out in the world. So, what are you doing in the area of alumni? Are you doing anything strategic in that area? Curious.
Yeah, so let me just hit two things. Probably for the last 8 years, we've done a senior thesis project that spans the last 2 years of high school. So beginning in their junior year, in fact, our juniors just did their senior thesis proposal defense. That was last week. So the
Mhm.
juniors who are rolling into their senior year are do a defense proposal. This is what I want to talk about in my senior thesis about faith formation and how it correlates with some of the stuff I'm interested in. And then they roll through their senior year and have to present, first of all, to the entire senior class. Every kid has to present. No one gets a pass. You got to write the paper. You got to get up in front of 120 of your buddies and you got to give your presentation. The top 10, five written and five spoken presentations, move on to the competition phase. And we do $30,000 in scholarships for the winners in the written phase and the spoken phase. So
Wow.
that's all intended to prepare our students to be stronger alums once they leave.
Yes.
That really is the core of it. And so um, we chose to survey the last 5 years of graduates. We probably should have gone further back with that. I think we'll just go ahead and do everybody next year. But
Mhm.
initially, we did those. We were not happy with the response rate, but I think we should have known that because these are kids who are in college, many of them still. And so you're not going to get them to engage. So I think
Yeah.
we made a bit of a miscalculation on just doing that 5 year group. But I
Yeah.
think from now on we'll do more, and I think we'll get a better response rate. I don't think the response rate was sufficient to really inform a lot of decision making, to be honest with you.
Mhm. Well, I mean, given that if your plan is to do it annually, then
Right.
obviously, I think if the alumni who take it the first time, you'll kind of have that snowball effect,
Yep.
hopefully, over multiple years, and you'll get a much better sample size, and I'm assuming that that would certainly help inform even some of the practices, upstream, if you will,
Yep.
in the school.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to just a last few set of questions. What did you like about the instrument? I mean, obviously, it sounds like you like it, but
Yeah. We liked a lot.
and it's really giving you some powerful
Yeah.
insight. But I'm big on transparency and ways that things that can be improved or what have you. But what did you like about the instrument? What did you not like about the instrument?
I don't know if there's anything we didn't like. I would maybe just say continuing to develop the ability to compare against peer groups, whether
Mm,
it's the size of the school, the admissions philosophy of the school. You've got a nice exemplary school population that it would be interesting to pull that group out and see how you compare against that.
mm.
So some of those things, I think that would be an interesting addition at some point in the future, but nothing we didn't like.
Oh, wonderful. That's good to hear. And if you didn't like something, it's okay to say it. I mean, we're don't have to like everything. But as long as you like most of it, it's
Most of
kind of
it.
like
I'm with you.
it's like grandma's cooking. It's
I
like
got
you
it.
love most of grandma's cooking, but there's a certain dishes that you stay clear of, but it's okay.
It was black eyed peas for me. I didn't like my grandma's black eyed peas. I don't know why, but I just didn't like
Lima
those.
beans for me. Lima beans. Yeah, that's Southern cooking, man. I
I
don't.
know.
Went right to the sweet potato pie, always,
Yes,
always.
absolutely.
Yeah, we're digressing here. So, but you mentioned one piece that you would administer differently. You talked about your alumni, and you said that
Uh-huh.
you would survey them, survey everyone, not just the last 5 years. But is there anything that you plan to do differently in terms of administering the survey going forward?
Not to the school population. I mean, I think we'll do as we did in the past to be as robust. And maybe I don't remember if hit all the grade levels in the study or not. Sometimes we'll do segments, but I mean, we're going to continue to expand it, utilize it to the fullest extent any way we can.
That's good. Well, I'm going to get you out of here with one last question. As we open up the podcast, leaders they have to make decisions.
Mm,
You know, uh, no one has unlimited resources. Even the schools that seem like they have a lot of resources, there's always constraints. And so,
mm.
if you had to make the case to those leaders who are on the fence and like, man, do I spend the money on this? Is it worth it? Is this going to be valuable? What is there a case that you would make, or what would be your advice to those school leaders who may be on the fence?
Someone said to me early on in my journey in school leadership, Steve, don't forget to measure what matters most. Don't
Mhm.
forget to measure what matters most. We can get in a hurry, can't we?
Yeah,
There's a lot of demands. There's a lot of things people want to know. There's a lot of problems people want us to solve. But
yeah,
not everything is the most important. Not everything rises to the level of Matthew 6:33, which is to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. That's apex. That's the top of
yeah.
the rung. So my encouragement would be, hey, listen, that matters the most. This is what matters the most at your institution. So that's if the question comes down, where do we spend what we have? I think it's got to go there. Some of the other areas you can figure out. There's really nothing else like FFI out there. And
Mhm.
so being able to lean into a product, a solution that is unique, but also hits what's most important for us as schools, that's a game changer. So I would not want anyone to blow past this opportunity. Look at it carefully. I'd be happy to answer questions. I know a lot of schools that use it would be happy to answer questions to encourage folks to use it. So it's the most important thing we do, Jerry. So we gotta dig in. We gotta make other sacrifices to prioritize it. And so that's what we did. We prioritized FFI, and I hope other schools will jump on board in the days ahead.
So it's clear that it's what the our researchers intended to really provide for our schools. It's super encouraging to hear a leader like yourself applying this, and you've clearly done your homework. It is embedded in your strategic plan. And if I can give my assessment, you clearly get it. Spiritual formation
Mm,
is what matters most. Seeking first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And not that we get it all right at the same time, but as you said, at that apex, as long
mhm.
as we are doing everything that we can to honor what Christ has called us to. And it sounds like you've given an invitation to individuals to reach out to you to draw from your well of wisdom.
Absolutely. No, I mean, Steve Whitaker at thefirstacademy.com, or Steve Whitaker at thefirstacademy.org. And yeah, also on LinkedIn, if you can reach me through LinkedIn, I'll answer questions there. But listen, Jerry and I know this, there's very few original ideas that he or I have. We've all learned from others along the way. And when we can then share what we've learned with others who follow us, that's a rewarding place to be. We love that, right? So
Amen.
that's the place we want to be and thrive in.
Amen. Steve, thank you so much for joining the
You got it.
podcast.
Hey, my pleasure. God bless you guys. Thank you for having me on.
Grafted Together is a presentation of the Association of Christian Schools International. Learn more about biblical worldview and spiritual formation at acsi.org/graftedtogether.